podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone and welcome to How Are the Podcast. It's Gav and you join us this fine Sunday morning on the back of Sunderland's 1-0 victory over Millwall at the Stadium of Light on Saturday. And we're going to be talking all about the fallout from the game and much, much more today. If you haven't already listened to the post-match reaction podcast that I did with Chris and Bomber straight after the game on Saturday, make sure you check that out. There's also a bunch of other great interviews while you're there from over the international break. We chatted to Bailey Wright, or I did, at least last week, which was a good chat. Rob Mason, Ian Murtagh, Malcolm Crosby, Kieran Maguire's loads to catch up on. Anyways, on to today's show. Joining me, first off, all the way from the other side of the globe, is Martin Wadness. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm very good, mate. Sun shining, even though the clocks have changed and I'm onto me second coffee of the morning. I'm not feeling too bad, but always happy when Sunderland have won a game. It's nice to be here. Also joining us today is a man I'm sure many of you are well acquainted with at this stage, surely. Sports writer who's been covering Sunderland now for over 25 years. I bet that makes you feel old, James. Hello, mate. James Hunter's with us.
Hello. Yes, good morning,
gentlemen. How are you doing, mate? Is it a fine Monday where you are? Or a fine Sunday, even?
It is. It's very fine. I'm looking out over the river. It's absolutely beautiful.
Oh, very nice. Were you there yesterday? Was it good?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. It was great. Yeah. Fantastic to see them win again.
Yeah. So how are you keeping these days? What you up to? Because we all know that you recently left the Evening Chronicle. So
yeah,
are you keeping yourself busy these days?
Yeah, I left the Chron just over a year ago, but I'm still writing a column on all things Sunderland for We Are Sunderland website, and doing a little bit of work at Sunderland University. So yeah, keeping myself busy.
Keeping yourself ticking over, eh? Anyways, we managed to get a victory on Saturday against Millwall, a nice 1-0 victory. It could have been more, I think, James, it's fair to say. I think Sunderland had a bunch of chances there where I certainly came away from the game and thought we should have maybe had a little bit more from it, and maybe the scoreline doesn't reflect perhaps how the game flowed. Yeah,
I'd agree. I think it's similar to a lot of games that Sunderland have had this season. They just haven't scored the goals to that accurately reflect the performance. The performance was a lot better than in recent games. Plenty of chances. Could have scored a couple of goals, maybe even three, even before they got the goal they did. But yeah, all things considered, the most important thing was the points and a decent performance, because people were quite down after the game down at Coventry.
Yeah, it was decent, Martin, wasn't it? I think I've seen people kind of focusing a lot on the penalty miss from Luke O'Nien. That shouldn't overshadow the performance. Like I said on the reaction pod I did with Bomber and Chris, I think it was a good performance from Sunderland. We should be pretty happy with that. I listened to Job after the game; he sounded pretty happy with it. So good place to restart our season, I would say.
I don't know if I'm being overly optimistic here, right? But that performance yesterday was far more reminiscent of the first third of the season than anything that we've seen since then. I thought that was us back to what we were doing really, really, really well in August, September, October. And I think if you look at the stats even, you kind of see that reflected. We had less possession than Millwall. We had fewer passes than Millwall, but we looked really, really dangerous. And I think we looked far more mentally with it than we had done in Coventry. I thought we looked really switched on and sharp mentally. And that didn't always translate to when we had the ball. It wasn't a perfect performance. But, you come away and I think, as James has said and you said, Gav, I think, we could have scored 2 or 3 quite easily and, Millwall couldn't have complained. Of course, we end up going into the last few minutes and having a bit of a scare and heart in your mouth stuff again, which, we want to avoid. But I thought it was a really promising performance when, we talked a few weeks ago, didn't we, about really ramping up into this run-in now, into the playoffs and, hopefully a successful playoff campaign. And I thought the signs, again, I'm probably being overly optimistic, but I thought the signs were really positive that there had been a little bit of a reset and we're kind of approaching this run-in now. As I think Le Bris has said, hasn't he? It's the next chapter of the season. And it kind of felt like that. Yes, I think the break's done us good. I think Millwall helped. I think they came out and they didn't sit back. And we've talked again about it'd been relatively easy to almost gain a point at Stadium Light by sitting back and sitting in that low block. Millwall came out, which helped us. But I think, if you look at the results that we've had all season, we tend to do better against the better sides, the teams that will come out and the teams that will try to attack. And obviously we're going to be playing those sort of teams in the playoffs. So I think, cautiously optimistic that we might have kind of solved one or two problems that we were encountering. And, hopefully it sets us up pretty nicely for the rest of the season. And fast forward 7 days' time after West Brom, and we're talking a different story, aren't we? But no, I thought it was a good performance.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard Job's interview after the game, James, but he was talking about how all of the build up to the game while we've been in international duty and in the camp has been to try and get back to playing in the way we started the season with. And I found that really interesting because this is something I think most fans have been talking about. Like, where's that high intensity and pressing gone, and why are we not zipping it about a bit quicker? It obviously has been recognised within the camp that was us at our best. That was us playing our best football. I think you saw that particularly at the start of the Millwall game where we were just right at it and we were into them and we were getting the ball wide to Patrick Roberts and we were trying to move quickly across the edge of the box. It did feel like, I mean, obviously we've had a bit of a break, but a lot of these players have been away and we're down to the bare bones. So, had we lacked in energy, you could have perhaps made an excuse for it. But it was, for me, it was definitely more like the type of performance I want to see from this Sunderland team.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, as Martin said, it's a lot more like the performances of earlier in the season. I mean, most of the season Sunderland have played in that manner. It's just probably since about the end of January things have just eased off a little bit. I mean, partly that's probably understandable. It's due to fatigue. There's been a fairly small pool of regular starters. You've got a very young team. You've got players like Chris Rigg who are playing week in, week out, starting games for the first time in their career. And so I guess it's only natural that things did start to taper off a little bit. But coming back after the international break, they did look reinvigorated, and they were started 100 miles an hour and could have scored a couple of goals early on. There was that early chance for Wilson Isidore and early chance for Patrick Roberts as well. First one blocked, second one tipped just wide by the goalkeeper. So yeah, they had early chances even before they got the goal and got themselves in front. But the performance was much more encouraging. It gave fans something to see, because we've all been there at the Stadium of Light when Sunderland have ground results out, and it's hardly set the place alight, and fans have been a bit downbeat about it. But I don't think people were yesterday. I think people felt enthused by it and encouraged by the fact that the team started to look a little bit more like it was earlier in the season.
What did you make of the team shape, Martin? The way that we set up, because obviously the big selection debate was over who was going to play fullback. We didn't know if Hume was going to make it. We'd heard Hjelde was injured. We'd heard Seelt was injured. He went with Hume on the left, and that's a position he's played for Northern Ireland at international level, so you can presume he's all right there. Alan Brown going over at right back, which is different, but I think he had a good game. But it was kind of, because we had this chat last week, didn't we, me, you and Chris? We were trying to work out how does he approach the running. And really, it was a bit like what Chris suggested, wasn't it? It was more of the same of what we've done well this season, as opposed to, we were suggesting maybe going 3 at the back or trying something a little bit different. But it was more what Chris was saying, wasn't it? It was more like, this is Sunderland from earlier in the season in terms of the shape and stuff. When you look at that, is that going to be the way we play the rest of the season, do you think? Or just still see room for wriggling about there?
No, I think it's 100% how we'll play. I think you, me, and Chris recorded before the press conference this week, didn't we? And we were just talking about the opportunity the lack of fullbacks might allow to try something different. It might naturally lend itself to 3 at the back as opposed to sort of shoehorning somebody in fullback. But I think Régis Le Bris talked about it in his press conference. He made it quite clear that he didn't think it was a time to change shape. He didn't think it was a time for experimentation. It was the time to get back to the triangles that we've had and the the players in the right positions and the form, getting back to that structure and the form that we showed earlier in the season. So once you heard him say that, I think you kind of go, well, we know exactly how we're going to play. It's going to be the same shape as we've had pretty much all season, because even when we have had those occasions where Mayenda's played up front with Isidore, Mayenda's kind of been in that rig role to a large extent. He's dropped off when we've been in possession and pushed up when we've been out of possession. We've talked about before, Rig pushes up almost alongside Isidore when we're out of possession into a 4-4-2. Alan Brown at right back wasn't that much of a surprise, really, because I think when you look at who we had available, yes, we've got a couple of, Joe Anderson, Bainbridge, people like that who could potentially go over to left back, but it would be a big call, wouldn't it, to chuck one of those two in at this stage of the season, certainly, especially when we haven't seen anything of them, even from the bench this season at all, really. Alan Brown's back fit. I think he has played there for Preston before on occasion. And I thought he did really well. Look, he wasn't tested too much, was he? But he looked comfortable. And I think he settled into it pretty quickly. And as you say, Trey Hume plays over on the left-hand side for Ireland. And I thought he had a really good game. The question mark with him was whether he was going to play. With his hip injury, I did think before the game he might sit this one out to make sure he was fit for the run-in. And even if he sits out the next couple, make sure he's raring to go for the playoffs. But he's obviously they're obviously quite confident that his injury isn't something that's going to be made worse by playing. It might just need a rest to cure it in pre-season. So no, I wasn't too surprised by the shape at all when you listened to Le Bris in midweek.
What did you think, James, of the way we set up? Because as Martin's just said, I think that's going to be the big call from the manager leading up to the playoffs and stuff, is what he does with that defence, because it's, there's still a lot of moving parts there. Cirkin will probably come back at some point when we don't know. Ballard, we're told, is 2 or 3 weeks away. We've got yelled at to come back at some point, and he probably would have started this game if he'd been fit. Sealt's not a million miles off. Like, do you think it's a problem at this stage of the season? We're not quite sure on the defence, or because it can be, a bit of a mind blowing thing. Yeah. You're like, you get those difficult games at the end of the season. It's like, right, well, so who do we pick now? I think we've had this conundrum for a lot of this season where we're not sure who the best defenders are and what the best combinations are and stuff. Do you see that as an issue or not?
I don't see it as too much of an issue. I mean, obviously there was a problem this weekend insofar as having no natural left back with Hjelde and Dennis Cirkin both injured. But I thought that the setup he went for worked pretty well with Alan Brown at right back. Again, as Martin said, he wasn't tested too much, and he might struggle against a speed merchant. I'm not sure. I don't know how he would cope with that. But that's the advantage of having such an experienced player that he's able to slot in and play that kind of role even when it's not his natural position. I think that when everybody's fit, you've got a good idea of what the back four looks like, haven't you? With Hume on the right, Cirkin on the left, and Mepham or Ballard, and alongside Luke O'Nien. That seems to be the preferred setup. To be honest, I think I prefer Mepham and Luke O'Nien as my centre back pairing. I think Mepham's been outstanding this season, even. Looking at the game yesterday, there he was in injury time, making an unbelievable block to preserve the extra 2 points, to preserve the win when Millwall had a chance to nick an equaliser right at the death. So I like him, but I'm certainly never disappointed when I look at the team sheet and for whatever reason he's not there and Dan Ballard is in. I mean, there's not much to choose from them. One's got youth on his side, the other one's got experience, but they're both two incredibly solid centre backs. And Sunderland are fortunate to have them both, or to hopefully have them both available for this run in and into the playoffs. So I think that the defence has been reasonably settled, to be honest. I know that from time to time there have had to be tweaks and adjustments, but really, you've got a good idea of what Régis Le Bris wants to play as his back four.
Yeah. What do you make of the left back thing then, Martin? I know you mentioned Bainbridge and Anderson. There were rumours Anderson might start this game, and he didn't. But if I'm them two players, I'm looking at the summer and thinking I need to probably leave, because if you can't get into the team now when we're desperate for a left back to play, I mean, how old's Bainbridge now? 19, 20 coming up, something like that. I think actually it might be 20 years old.
He's 21.
Yeah, I mean, if your manager's not going to chuck you in now, you're not going to make it there. Unfortunately, that's the sad reality of it.
No, it is. I think Bainbridge had a loan spell at Kilmarnock earlier in the season, didn't he? Didn't quite establish himself up there with them. And it's always difficult, isn't it? Because a lot of managers will tend to go for experience, and they'll tend to go for playing experienced players out of position than bringing a youngster in for his debut. And in a lot of respects, the Millwall game on Saturday was actually a really good game to give somebody like Bainbridge a start if they've got a bit of faith in them, because it's a relative. Yes, we want to win. Yes, we want to get back into form. Yes, we want to ramp up for the playoffs. But nothing was ever going to be decided on Saturday. It wouldn't, it's not going to ultimately change the course of us getting into the playoffs anyway if we didn't pick up 3 points on Saturday against Millwall. So it was actually a really good game to give somebody like that a chance and see if they're good enough. I think Bomber said yesterday on the pod that you and Chris did with him that with Alan Brown being given game time, the obvious benefit of that, you're getting 90 minutes into his legs, because he could come in and be an important part in this run-in. You've got Lefay to come back in as well. But I think, and even for Hielder, right? Because as you say, if Hielder had been fit, he likely plays at left back and Hume stays at right back. If Hielder's fit for next weekend, I don't think I would change it. And that's the dilemma that it's the problem that you have if you're injured and you miss a chance like that to get into the team. Alan Brown's come in. I think Alan Brown, as I said earlier, did a pretty good job, and I wouldn't actually leave him out next week if Hume is fit. You might rest Hume and put Hielder in and switch it around like that. But look, I think Joe Anderson's been here for 2 seasons. 24-year-old, almost 25. He's not going to be sticking around, is he? Bainbridge, as I say, I think if they had confidence in him making it, I think he's 21 in June or May or June. He would have played yesterday if they had some confidence in him. So it looks like an unfortunate thing. But you look at the bench yesterday, and there was so many youngsters on the bench, wasn't there? Lavery was on the bench, and Middlemas and Harrison Jones. Apart from Myendra and Watson and Alexic, it was packed full of young players who barely played at all in the first team. And I think you look at the possibility. I think that Rob Mason mentioned, and we discussed when me, you, and Chris spoke last week about rotating the side and giving a few players a chance. We haven't actually got players to bring in. We're actually right down to the bare bones really of the squad at the moment. Hopefully that leaves next week if Lefay is back and 1 or 2 others. But we haven't actually got that depth to make any changes at this point. So it's difficult to kind of see how we would change it if he really wanted to. Bar bring somebody in who's not got any minutes at all.
Yeah, it's just an interesting one to me, because I just think if you're not getting that opportunity, James, you're likely never going to get it now, are you? It's a shame. I'm more sort of gutted for Ollie Bainbridge, really. I say gutted. I'm happy we won the game, and I'm happy how it went. And I agree with Martin. Brown and Hume did brilliantly. But I just think when you're a young player, you're waiting for your chance. Is Bainbridge going to ever get a better chance to play in the team? Probably not at this stage, I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, probably not. I think a lot depends on the circumstance as well. So, where Sunderland now, they need probably 4-6 points, something like that, as could be to absolutely guarantee that playoff place. I think if the playoff place was already in the bag, I mean, we're all talking as though Sunderland are going to get into the playoffs, and of course, I think that they will. But until it's signed and sealed, nobody wants to take things too much for granted. If it had been signed and sealed already and guaranteed, then he might well have thought that, well, that's the opportunity to bring in Ollie Bainbridge and give him a go. It's a very low risk strategy then. While as long as things remain still, slightly up in the air, even there's any possibility of blowing the playoff place. I think he's probably right to take a more cautious approach. I think if had Sunderland already been secure in the top six, he might well have thought, well, do I need to risk Trey Hume if he's not 100%? Let's keep him back for the playoffs. Do I need to play Alan Brown out of position? Can I rejig things? But yeah, I don't think he's ever going to be criticised for playing the more experienced option. But had he have brought in the youngster for his debut and it not worked out and Millwall run riot, then of course you're wide open to criticism, aren't you? But yeah, I do take your point. So Ollie Bainbridge is of an age where he needs to be playing. So he doesn't look like he's going to get regular football at Championship level with Sunderland, and you would assume that should Sunderland be fortunate enough to win promotion, then it would be even tougher if you're looking at Premier League level. So yeah, if you're not playing regularly by the time you're 21, then you're struggling a bit. Same with Joe Anderson. I mean, Joe Anderson's been here 2 years, is it? 2 seasons?
Yeah.
He's barely played, made a handful of appearances, if that. If you were going to involve Joe Anderson yesterday, then at least play him in his strongest position, play him at centre back, and then shift Luke O'Nien to one of the full back roles. That would have been another option. But really, I think he now sees Luke O'Nien as such an integral part of that central defence that he doesn't want to do that. So then, do you want to play Joe Anderson at left back? I don't know. I thought that the setup he went for was the right one, and given the personnel available to him, he's not got a lot of experienced options at the moment. As you were saying, there's an awful lot of youngsters on that bench yesterday, including some players that I've seen many times play for the under-21s. I went and saw the under-21s against Leeds the other week. There's and there are players there that are not going to make it at Sunderland at first team level, and unfortunately, and that's just one of the fact of life. They'll make a career in the game somewhere, but probably not here.
I was going to ask you that actually. What your opinion of particularly Ollie Bainbridge is, because I know you go to quite a lot of the 21s games. Is he somebody you could potentially see playing in the Championship? Because we don't know a lot about him. I know, like Martin mentioned before, went to Kilmarnock earlier in the season, made his debut at Parkhead, I think, against Celtic. Massive game for your first game in senior football, and also played a couple of games in Europe. So he's not played lots this season, but he's played some football this season at first team level at another club. What's he actually like, Ollie Bainbridge?
I think, like I say, if you're reaching 21 and you're not playing, and you've not had at least 20 games, let's say, by the time he's 21, then you're probably going to struggle to make an impact, at least at Sunderland, in the Championship.
You're practically a pensioner when you're 21-year-old at Sunderland.
Well, yeah, to a degree. I mean, you should at least be exposed to first team football by the time you're 19, shouldn't you? I mean, you look at players coming through at 16 and 17, Chris Rigg and Joe Bellingham and such have you. You should at least be sort of exposed to it by the time you're 19. If you're not getting there by the time you're 20 and 21, is it going to happen for you? You might get a chance at a club lower down, say. Just pick for instance, a Plymouth. Plymouth might give you an opportunity to play at Championship level, or a club like in a position like Plymouth. But I don't think that he's going to make the grade at Sunderland, and that's not because he's a bad kid. He's a decent player, but just if you haven't done it by this point, then he and his representatives will be looking at saying, well, really, I need to go somewhere where I'm getting regular games.
Yeah. Martin, something James touched on before there, whether we're ready to say we're definitely in the playoffs or not. Are you ready? I mean, we've all kind of accepted, I think we're going to be in there, but 15-point gap now between us and 7th place. We're in there, aren't we? I don't think we're going to move now.
Well, we have to take a catastrophic sort of turn of form for us not to make it, in a tremendously good set of form for other teams to sort of knock us out of there, really, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I know it's not going to happen. with Leeds drawing against Swansea, you're kind of going, there's only 9 points. There's only 9 points to make up to the second. There could still be a twist or turn where we get our hopes up, with somebody dropping some points somewhere. I think that'll happen. I don't think we'll get automatics at all. I've completely written that off. But I think there'll be a twist or turn over the next couple of weeks that give us a little bit of, oh shit, it's back on, and then it's not. But no, I'm happy to say that we're in the playoffs. You'd get very short odds on the bookies, wouldn't you? If you stuck £100 on there, you might get £100 and 50 pence back or something.
I think this is just my natural sense of caution. I think probably it's something that is developed over my 30 years in journalism, is that you never say something's done till it's done. No. I guess that now I'm in a position where I can take that hat off and I can say, and yes, I do think Sunderland are in the playoffs, absolutely. But if I'm writing, which is what I've done all my career, if I'm writing something down, then I have to, I have to give myself a get out. I can't say it's done until it's done. Yeah. But maybe I don't need to be as cautious as that. I'm sure that I'm as confident as anybody that's seen Sunderland this year that yes, they are going to make the playoffs. Maybe I don't need to be quite as cautious, but I think it's just a natural part of it, isn't it? Because if you're writing something down, if you're writing an article, if you're writing a piece, and you say Sunderland are in the playoffs and it doesn't happen, then it's there for all time, and you'll never live it down. I don't really have that problem so much anymore. As far as catching the top, the automatic promotion, the problem is, of course, that you not only need one team to drop 9 points, you need two teams to drop 9 points. You need both Burnley and Leeds, as it stands, to drop that 9 points. And that's why I think it's very unlikely you really are sort of snooped. You might well claw some points back, but whether you'd cap both of those, never mind Sheffield United, who are another couple of points further on, I don't know. I think that's probably. I was just saying to somebody at the ground yesterday, just saying that given that there's so much to be positive about Sunderland's season and so much excitement, still to come with the playoff campaign, still ahead. There had been a feeling people were a little bit downbeat, I thought that a lot of that was because the realisation had sort of sunk in that Sunderland aren't going to catch the top two, and so that takes a little bit of getting used to until you readjust your expectations, say, right, okay, gear up and go again for the playoffs, and that was probably what just contributed to that, I think.
Man, I tell you what, if there was one team that can either stuff the playoffs up from here or get automatic promotion from here, it's us. Isn't it?
Very true. Of course. Well, we've all seen it. We've all seen it.
Yeah, it's for me, I think as long as that faint bit of hope is there, we should still be using that as motivation. And I think James has touched on something there. It's almost like that cycle of grief, isn't it? It's like, all right, we've accepted that maybe it's not going to happen now. So now we're kind of getting over that disappointment and that sadness that we felt as a result of it. And I think we all acknowledge the 2 week break was really needed, just for a mental reset more than anything. Fitness wise, I don't actually think the players were miles off it. I think we've not been as sharp recently, but we've certainly mentally not looked as sharp. And I think that break was definitely needed. And it was interesting, James, that Joe Bellingham after the game talked about sort of getting, as I mentioned at the start, getting back to the way that we played earlier in the season. Do you think this is the way we have to approach the build to the playoffs? That we have to just almost, we've talked about it on here, like a mini pre-season almost. You rather than focusing so much on the next game and like we need to win it, we must win this game to get 3 points. We're actually looking at it and going, right, we now have 7 games to prepare for a massive playoff campaign, almost like a pre-season. And again, I've said this a few times, and you might be able to suggest something here, but I don't remember a team ever being in this position where with so many games to go, they kind of know their fate. And it's like, right, we're going to be in the playoffs with, what was 10, 11 games? Really, it was, we saw after that Leeds game, I think we kind of accepted we weren't making the top 2. I don't know if you can remember any situation where that's ever happened, but is this the right approach to it?
The only thing I can think of, and I wasn't covering Sunderland at the time, so I could be wrong here. But what about the season that ultimately ended up, with the defeat against Charlton? Was that were they well in the playoffs long before?
That was a funny season, wasn't it? Because we were kind of mid-table, or sort of in that sort of bottom of the top third, if you like, going into the new year and after the new year, and we went on a really good run. And I think it was Easter Monday at home against QPR, and Mike Sheeran scored 2 goals against us to peg us back from 2-0 to 2-2, and that scuppered our automatic hope. So it was from Easter where we kind of knew that automatics were going to be tricky. So it's probably a month or so ahead of where we are this campaign. But it is a funny situation to be in. You're kind of rarely in that almost limbo, unless you're in mid-table. But that's when you can't go up or down, isn't it? And, we have got, obviously, still that big carrot of going up at the end of the season.
I'd have to have a look at the Jack Ross season as well, which obviously also ended in playoff defeat against Charlton. But that might have been they might have known for a few games that they'd already got the top 6 sealed. Then I'd have to have a look. That's one of the other things when you covered so many games. You can remember in more detail, Martin, than I do. Some people can sort of recall the detail. A lot of the time, I struggle to recall the season. Never mind the actual game and the scorers of individual games. But yeah, I mean, more broadly, the point that you're making, how did Sunderland approach this, this final 7 games? I think once you've got the points, you've sealed the deal, you're in the top 6, then I think you can start to think, right, okay, what do we do now? Is this the opportunity to blood a youngster if the opportunity arises? Is it a case of just bringing players that are coming back from injury, putting them in for half an hour, 20 minutes, whatever, to build them to the point that they're ready for the playoffs, say an Enzo Lefebvre when he's ready, for instance? Is it all about getting players up to speed, keeping them ticking over, keeping everybody's fitness up? Do you need to approach it that way? Because the actual results aren't so important to a point. Obviously, you don't want to go into the playoffs on the back of 3 or 4 defeats. That'll do nothing for the mood. So yes, you've always got to balance that, but at least you haven't got the same sense of jeopardy, have you?
No, it's one of them. I think we're in a very fortunate position, and we've got to take advantage of it. And I think this was a good sign of where we're headed, Martin. I think is that because we were a little bit worried. We were thinking, well, you look at the games, and yes, you almost treat it like a mini pre-season. But as James touched on, if you change too much and the results start being affected, then it's almost counterproductive, isn't it? So for us to, look at this game and go, right, we're kind of resetting mentally, and we're going to try and get back to a way of playing which suits us ultimately. For us to then get a win and a clean sheet, I think obviously it's job done then, but it could have went very differently. Had we changed too much?
No, it could have. And look, I think, as we've talked about a little bit as well, and you were certainly in the podcast that me and Chris did last week, that 2-week break was just needed. I think it's just been needed for everybody. Even after the Coventry game, there was criticism of Le Bris, and you're reading some people, I know it's only a very small portion of people on forums or social media, saying we need to get rid of Le Bris. We're never going to win the playoffs with Le Bris in charge. We need to get rid of him. I was looking earlier, and here's a stat for you. Now, I'll just caveat, or I'll just go back to my Mike Sheeran fact before, because I think it was Good Friday, not Easter Monday, so somebody might pull me up about that. And somebody will pull us up about this if it's not right. But I've just gone through all of our managers ever, right, this afternoon. Régis Le Bris has the best win rate of any Sunderland manager who's managed more than 30 games in the top 2 divisions since Tom Watson in the 1890s. So, if you're looking at context and the bigger picture, to even suggest there's anything wrong on a head coach managerial level when we've our most successful manager in the top 2, and look, you can argue different things about obviously the Premier League and First Division being more difficult than the second tier and all that sort of stuff, but on a 39 games, he's got more than a 50% win ratio now. That's 20 wins in 39 games. Any talk of him is crazy, like absolutely mental. if you're looking
To
at
be fair, to be fair, Tom Watson got pelters on social media and the forums. People were saying, he's taken us as far as he can.
I'm
how
sure
many titles? He's never going to win the title again. It's all over.
I'm sure the letters page of the Sunderland Echo and Shipping Gazette in the 1895 season was a bit tasty.
It was quite a sight to behold. Yeah,
but but I think it's just in that win. Going back to the point, Gav, like that win on Saturday against Millwall, it just stops that, because it's so easy to get embroiled in the minute detail, isn't it? It's so easy to react to a bad performance or a bad defeat, and take issue with a formation or a team selection and all that sort of stuff. And look, he's not been perfect. We'd love to see us win by 2 or 3 goals, 4 goals. We should have done yesterday, and that was yet another game that we should have scored more and won by more. But if you take a step back, which I think this 2 weeks has given everybody the chance to do, you kind of go, you know what, we're actually doing well this season. We've got over that, as you say, that grief process of the top 2 looking as if it's gone. And you go, okay, but we're actually doing all right. And look, football's never perfect. Football's never consistent. Football's never predictable. If it was, we wouldn't be as interested in watching it as we are, because that's what keeps us coming back, the unknown. The different things happen. We can't ever get the consistent performances out of players that you'd maybe want. If Patrick Roberts could put in a display like he did on Saturday every week, he wouldn't be playing for Sunderland in the Championship. He'd be playing in the top flight. So you've got to take all of these things with a bit of context and proportion. And I think, again, that win on Saturday against Millwall just gets everything nice and settled down again, and gives us that opportunity to go into these, last 7 games of the league season. Now it's calmed the noise, and hopefully we can continue that run. Get a draw away at West Brom on Saturday, get a win against West Brom, and all of a sudden you've got that little spring in your step again, haven't you? And that's going to be so important as we get into this last stage of the season.
Just to touch on something Martin talked about there, James, what's your opinion of Régis Le Bris and the way he's done this season, and some of the recent criticisms of him and the team and all the rest of it? Do you think that it's fair, or do you think, as Martin says, there should be a broader perspective taken on all of this?
No, I think that I think you need to take a broader perspective. I think that the critics of the serious critics of Régis Le Bris are in the minority. I think that most people appreciate the job that he's done. I must admit, like so many people that come into the club now, players and a head coach and this, people don't have a clue what to expect from them. They're not. The club isn't fishing from a talent pool where people come in as a known quantity a lot of the time. Le Bris came in, nobody knew what to make of him. They thought, club had waited 3 months to make a permanent appointment, and then come up with a French manager that nobody had got a detailed knowledge of over here, and who'd just been relegated in France. And people thought, well, this could go badly wrong. And in fact, it's gone very, very well. So, kudos to the club for making that appointment. Nobody knew how it would turn out, and it's turned out very well, as I say. So I think he's done a remarkable job, given that he's adjusted to a football in a different country, a high level in the Championship, a level that's notoriously difficult to navigate. The club was in the conversation for automatic promotion right up to February. People have really seen a manager and a team that's exceeded expectations this season, particularly after how grim things were in the second half of last season. So I think he deserves a lot of praise for the job he's done. Of course, yeah, people have individual criticisms on a game-by-game basis. Should have used a different substitute? Should he have made more changes? Should he have rotated the team? Should he have done this? Should he have done that? Of course, that's the same with any manager, head coach at any level on any given week. That's nothing. That's not a problem of Le Bris. I wouldn't say that there's one consistent theme of things that he doesn't he gets wrong or that he gets criticised for. I think it's just the vagaries of how football coaches and managers, people comment on them week to week. But yeah, I think he's done a terrific job, and I'd be amazed if there were serious voices calling for him to be replaced in the wake of that Coventry game. Yeah, of course, Sunderland were really poor in that Coventry game. It was probably the worst performance. I don't know, probably for the last couple of seasons. It was a proper stinker. But you're going to get that every once in a while. I get that people are angry. I get that it happened on a weekend when, there were other things happening elsewhere, which we probably won't talk about, but, brought into stark relief the fact that Sunderland had played poorly down at Coventry. So I guess there's a bit of immediate, knee-jerk anger in the wake of a result, but then you have a bit of time to cool down and take a broader perspective and look at the achievements and where Sunderland are, and I think he's done a great job. I really do. I've been really impressed by him. I've been impressed by not only the results that he's brought here, but also the calmness and the coolness that he's brought to the job. Win, lose or draw, even against Coventry, he was obviously hugely disappointed after that game. But he doesn't strike me as the sort of teacup throwing, stripping the paint off the walls in the dressing room. He's not that type of guy at all. And I guess some people like a bit of passion. People like a bit of the Peter Reid Premier passions, effing and blinding, people like that. But at the same time, there's something to be said for the sort of cool, detached, Arsene Wenger, cerebral side of things as well. And I think he has that. So yeah, I've been really, really impressed with him.
Yeah, he's a nice, cool operator, Régis Le Bris. I've said this a few times. I quite like the way he never gets too high, he never gets too low. He's just steady away. And, in contrast, maybe not contrast, but on the other sideline was Alex Neil, who was actually very much that kind of manager too, just very calm and didn't overreact to defeats and didn't get too hyper when we won a game. And then when we went into that playoff campaign under Alex Neil, then the rest is history. You know what I mean? It all worked out in the end. Maybe that sort of calmness will do Sunderland the world of good,
I saw Alex after the game yesterday. It was nice to catch up with him for a little chat afterwards. And he was very complimentary about Sunderland and particularly the attacking players of Sunderland and about the blend of experience and youth that they've got. And he was very complimentary and wish Sunderland all the best for the playoff campaign. So that was good. It was good to see that. I know the manner of that he left Sunderland. Left fans with a nasty taste in their mouth, but. I suppose when you look at the way that things have gone since, Sunderland have gone on to Tony Mowbray and now Régis Le Bris, I don't think Sunderland fans, feel quite so, furious about things now as they did 2 years ago.
Yeah, I do wonder if in his heart of hearts he kind of regrets jumping ship. It could have been him, couldn't it, Martin? It's one of those, Alex Neil did a cracking job with Sunderland. I was talking this week with Bailey Wright on the podcast, which we put out on Friday, and he was really complimentary of Alex Neil, and so was Steve Aziz, who we spoke to last week. He's obviously a popular character in his time at the club, but you do wonder, don't you, maybe if things had worked out very differently, whether it could have been him in the dugout.
I don't think he'll ever admit it, but I think he probably does if you pinned him down and force him to go back and go back to that day he decided to leave, and whether he'd do the same thing. I don't think he would. And obviously didn't work out too well for him at Stoke. And it was interesting listening to the Millwall fan that we had on before the game, because it sounds as if Alex Neil's kind of signed up for a similar sort of type of job at Millwall as he had at Sunderland, where he's got a director of football. They're bringing in young players, they're prioritising the development of young players to sell them on over bringing in experienced championship players. So, yeah, you kind of wonder whether he probably would have maybe made a different decision if he could go back in time. But I'm just glad we didn't have to have another day like the 5-1 the last time the time before he came back with the team. So it was nice to get one over on him.
Yeah, it was. I was actually a bit surprised that he didn't approach the game in a similar way we did when he brought Stoke, where they just put three big lads in the middle of the park and dominated us. They just, kind of allowed Chris Rigg and Job in particular to just do what they wanted through the middle. It was crackers. Just on the game, and this is something which is at the back of my mind at the minute, is obviously the penalty thing. James will kind of touch on it. We talked a lot on the last pod about the penalty, so I'm not going to the minutiae of it, but does it worry you at all that with a handful of games left to the end of the season where we could end up in penalty shootout situations, that one, Sunderland are struggling so badly from the spot, and two, there's clearly some sort of disconnect between the players on who actually takes them?
Yes, is the short answer. Yes, it is a big worry because Sunderland's record is dreadful. They've missed the last four penalties. They've missed 4 out of 5 this season, and it becomes a mental thing as well when Sunderland win a penalty, earn a penalty, and the ball's put on the spot. Fans aren't confident any longer that it's going to result in a goal. You contrast that with when Jack Clark was here. There's people had no doubts. Basically, when he put the ball down, you thought goal. Now, people quite rightly probably can't watch. We have to watch through their fingers. It's a mess, really. I was very surprised. Very surprised. I was surprised that Luke O'Nien took the penalty yesterday because Wilson Isidore was still on the pitch. We'd been led to believe that Wilson Isidore would carry on taking penalties even after that game at Burnley. So I was all geared up to say, well, I wonder what the reaction of the crowd will be when Wilson puts the ball on the spot. And of course, it wasn't him. Luke O'Nien had a perfect penalty record in shootouts. 6 out of 6, I think he scored in shootouts. Yeah. But that was a pretty dreadful penalty. I saw it back again yesterday evening on the highlights, and it wasn't anywhere near the corner. It wasn't hit anywhere near hard enough. It was a poor penalty. Romain Mundle wanted to take it, but was overruled. I don't know. It just looks a bit of a mess at the moment. Nobody really knows what to do. There are other players that I thought might step up. People like Joe Bellingham. Would be Trey Humes, a great striker of a ball, as we've seen. So there are other options in the squad, but it's something that Sunderland have got to sort out because, as you rightly say, this season is gearing up to become a 2 or a 3 game shootout for Sunderland, and penalties could come into that, penalty shootouts, and then it will be all important. You're then not trying to find one taker; you're trying to find 5. Maybe more than 5. Do you know what I mean? Out of that squad. So this is something that needs addressing. It's also quite interesting. I don't know whether it was mentioned, but that was the first penalty that Sunderland have had at the Stadium of Light since October 2023. It's gone a long, long time since we've seen a penalty up at the Stadium of Light. So having waited all that time, it was, it wasn't worth the wait, shall we say?
Yeah. We talked about preparation for the playoffs, Martin. I think that's got to be on the agenda, hasn't it? Sort this penalty situation out, get practicing, work out who the actual order of takers are. I mean, you can't manufacture a realistic scenario with a penalty shootout because, unless we just get a penalty every game between now and the end of the season, which would be nice, be lovely, means we can get plenty of good practice in. But certainly when they get into training this week, that has to be nipped in the bud, doesn't it? Because, I mean, Mundle storming off the pitch because he didn't get the penalty. Isidore obviously wanted to take it. I think Trey Hume wouldn't give the ball to Isidore. Then I almost think Luke O'Nien reluctantly took it, just as one of the most experienced players on the pitch. He just, thought he would.
No, well, I think according to the Northern Echo, Le Bris had said that Luke O'Nien was a designated penalty taker. It would be decided what game O'Nien would take the penalties.
He did say that afterwards. He did say that afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. So which again, there's been some criticism of Le Bris not having that, because I think after Burnley he'd said that he just allows the players to decide who takes them, but that's obviously changed. So that makes any criticism of Le Bris in his approach to the players taking penalties or deciding who takes penalties completely redundant after the Millwall game. It makes Mundle's reaction worse. If he knows that 09's a designated penalty taker, and look, you can argue the rights and wrongs of whether 09 should be or not, and I don't think he will be after Saturday. But that makes Mundle's reaction really bad. And you can understand why you want to take it, but if that's already been decided and you're part of a team, that reaction, it's petulant, it's naive, it's not a good look. And I was glad that because he stormed off down the tunnel. He was subbed a minute later. He stormed off down the tunnel. I was glad to see him back on the pitch after the full-time whistle, celebrating with everybody. Because somebody's obviously had a word with him, or he's had a word with himself, and he's got himself back on. I'm sure Le Bris will deal with that first thing on Monday, because that's not a good look, and it was a poor showing. To me, Isidore should have taken it, because again, it's a relatively low pressure situation. And I said after Burnley to you, didn't I? That will not be the last time Isidore takes a penalty against James Trafford this season. And I still think that the season's destined to come down to that moment.
Oh, yeah.
And whether you want,
it would be good for Netflix, wouldn't it?
Oh Jesus! But I think Isidore should have taken that. And I think you're right. You go through the team, and to me, there's probably 5 or 6 people who you would select ahead of Luke 09 to take a penalty. I think Mundle, yes, he was upset not being able to take it, but you can see why he'd want to take it, because he's got a cracking shot on him. He's great at set pieces. Trey Hume, you've mentioned. Alan Brown, I'm sure he could take a penalty. Job, Chris Riggs, great at set pieces. Roberts has took one and missed one this season. So, there's a number of options there. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens if we get a penalty between now and the end of the season, because we don't tend to get too many. So the chances of us getting one before the playoffs come around are fairly slim. But there's probably a season more recently than this that we've missed a number of penalties. But the last time I can remember us missing a string of penalties like that was, what was it, 95, 96, when we went up under Peter Reid. And we missed 4 or 5 in a row until Martin Scott actually started putting them away. I think Paul Bracewell missed. I think Kevin Ball had missed. I think David Kelly had missed. So we went through a similar situation. Michael Gray missed at Liverpool. So we had a similar run where we missed a number, and then it landed on Martin Scott. He took them for a couple of years after that. He's fairly reliable. So fingers crossed, whoever takes the next one, they'll put it away. Because, as you say, it's going to become a psychological thing. And that's the thing, is if you've got somebody like Jack Clark, who's sticking 5 or 6 penalties away a season, nobody else is having the chance to step up. So it's not actually a problem for anybody else. But now we've had, 3 players step up now, and because we've missed 4 out of 5, it's a psychological and mental burden for the team and everybody else watching. Because, normally when you get a penalty, you think, the chances are we'll score this. At the minute when we're getting the penalty, you're thinking the chances are we're not going to score this. So we'll...
it's already a psychological thing, isn't it? It's already a psychological thing. If Sunderland win a penalty down at West Brom next weekend, who's going to take it? Do they look confident? Should somebody else take it?
Yeah.
Immediately the seed of doubt is there, isn't it? Rather than like, this is my penalty taker. He scores 9 times out of 10. Put the ball down and off we go. Already, there'll be uncertainty. Personally, I don't know who Régis Le Bris will get to take the next penalty, but if I were in his shoes, I would come out and say so in advance so that people know what the situation is. Say if Wilson Isidore's on the pitch, then he'll take it. If Wilson Isidore's not on the pitch, then it'll be so and so, whatever it might be. And all right, some people go, I don't really want that person to take the penalty, but you've got to make decisions and stick by them. What I quite liked, I take your point about Romain Mundle, and it wasn't a great reaction. What was a great reaction is that he wanted to take it.
Yes.
That was good. Because Luke O'Nien looked a little bit reluctant. He looked sort of like, all right, then okay, give me the ball, all right. Whether he was a designated taker or not, he didn't look like a man that was confident he was going to score. Whereas Romain Mundle had been fouled, jumped up, said, give me the ball. And in those situations, I'm a big believer, give him the ball. If somebody really wants to take it, then, and if they then miss, then they've got to deal with that. Should they have been so strident in wanting the ball? But if somebody looks confident and got a bit of fire in their eyes, get them to take the penalty.
Yeah, something that's going to be nipped in the bud on Monday as we try and prepare for the rest of the season. Speaking of which, the rest of the season, what we got now, 7 games, is it? I've having a look. I think it's 7 games. How do you see the rest of the season panning out, James? We've got some tough games still to come. Teams have still got stuff to play for. I think obviously West Brom next week. Very much, their chances of being in the playoffs are there, but not guaranteed. How do you feel about the way this season pans out from this point?
As I say, as we said earlier, I'm still very positive about it. I think Sunderland have just got to get this top 6 place nailed down, absolutely, mathematically nailed down, as quickly as possible, and then they can start to concentrate. They can look ahead to those playoff games and start to get themselves in the right shape. West Brom next weekend, that's going to be a tough game. Obviously, the Tony Mowbray factor. I think Tony will get a fabulous, reception from the travelling fans when they go down there. I don't think there are many managers that I've worked with at Sunderland that are as popular as Tony. I think you'll get a really good reception down there, win, lose or draw, and I think you'll really appreciate that. But West Brom are a tough side. They lost late on in injury time against Norwich, didn't they? This weekend. So they'll be smarting from that. They've still got everything to play for. They're still got every chance of finishing in the top 6, and could well come up against Sunderland. I mean, there are some fascinating possibilities looking ahead, aren't there? I mean, when you look at the teams that are competing for places there, and the playoffs and potential Wembley finals. I mean, you've already mentioned, Martin, about James Trafford and Wilson Isidore maybe squaring up over a penalty again. There's a possibility that Sunderland could face Leeds at Wembley, or Middlesbrough for that matter, in the playoffs, which will be interesting, or Tony Mowbray. So there are all kinds of possibilities and things that could happen in the playoffs. But that's what makes it such an exciting, such a magical thing, isn't it? The football, it's one of those games that has so many different strands of narrative that you don't know which direction it's going to go. But just looking at those teams there, I mean, there's endless possibilities for a really sort of fairy tale ending, or a nightmare ending, obviously, of course. But let's concentrate on the fairy tale. Yeah.
What's your gut feeling though? Where do you think they'll get promoted?
My gut feel, my gut feeling is, my gut feeling is that they won't get promoted, and I can't back that up with any evidence whatsoever. Obviously, I desperately hope that they do win promotion, but I just have a belief that when it comes to the playoffs, it's one team out of 4. It's not always the strongest team that prevails, and in the end, sometimes it can be the team that's on a run. I mean, you could have a team that sneaks into the playoffs in 6th spot and goes up. So yeah, I have a feeling. My gut says no. My heart says, please, yes. But I guess it's just guesswork. It's just guesswork.
Yeah.
It's pure guesswork. I can't back that up with any empirical evidence. I couldn't put together an 800-word comment piece on why Sunderland aren't going to win promotion through the playoffs. I just couldn't do it. It's not possible for me to do that. I think the only thing you can do is cross your fingers, your toes, and everything else, and hope that they do make it.
Are you feeling any more confident, Martin, based on how we reacted after Coventry?
I'm feeling some degree of confidence because, as I said earlier, I think we've been better against the better sides this season. We've been better against teams that'll come out a bit rather than sit back. And we're going to have some sort of psychological, whether it's an advantage or not, I don't know, but we're not going to have the psychological thing of missing out on the top two on, the last 2 or 3 games of the season as one of Burnley, Leeds or Sheffield United will. And I think I do think we're the 4th best team in the league this season. And I think Burnley and Leeds and Sheffield are better than us. I think the big unknown for us is Lefebvre. And I think he is a genuine difference maker for the playoffs. And I think he, whether it's a free kick or a set piece or that. Remember when he came in against Burnley for his debut for that first game he played, and he played that ball from the left with the outside of his foot, all split the defence through Isdo, and Isdo hit the post. Like we haven't got another player who can do that, who can pick that sort of pass out, and all it'll take is one moment of magic to be really crucial in the playoffs. And I think we've got the best player out of any of the 4 teams that we could face to produce that moment of magic. And that's what will give us confidence going into the playoffs. So I'll keep my fingers crossed. Look, we've seen so many things before that, we would, no Sunderland supporter would ever say we're confident of going up through the playoffs. We've been through this situation so many times before and had heartache at semi-final and final stage, haven't we? But, if you're looking at it relatively objectively and you're looking at what matters in playoff campaigns, having a good run up, not coming in with a hangover of disappointment, which I think we've got time to get rid of that hangover, getting players back fit, like, if we can get Sirkin back fit and get Ballard back fit and get that depth built up a little bit, and then you throw Lefebvre into the mix, if we can get him built up to fitness, and if he's back next week, I really hope he's on the bench and not thrown in from the start for 80 minutes, because I think we need to build up his fitness so he's peaking right on that first playoff game. And I don't really care if he's on the bench all the way through. He needs to be ready for then, because I do genuinely think he can make a difference. He can be the difference maker and decide whether we go up or not. And I think that's really why they bought him in January, because he could be the difference.
Well, here's hope, and that's the optimism I wanted to end off on. Thank you very much.
Hang on a second, Gav. We haven't heard what you think.
That's right.
What do I think? Well, long-time listeners of this podcast will know that I am glass half full. I think
half full Henderson.
That's me. No, I do genuinely think we'll get promoted. I agree with what Martin said about how against the better teams, I just think the way we set up against sides who are open, and we saw this to a degree against Millwall, and we saw this against Burnley twice, we saw this against Leeds twice, I would say. We saw this against Sheffield United twice, that when these teams come and play against us, we've got players who can hurt them. And as Martin said, the big unknown's Lefebvre. If he's fit and he's firing, if we can just slot him in somewhere amongst the rest of it, which already works, I fancy us. I do. I really do. I think I'm a lot more optimistic than a lot of Sunderland fans are, and I can't understand why people aren't. Because for me, this is the best side we've had in years in terms of individuals. When we click, we're so good. We can be devastating, and I just think it's all about how we prepare from this stage. So I'm, very hot, glass half full person. I do still think we'll get promoted. I think if you'd offered me this position in the summer, and I keep saying this, I would have 100 million% have taken it. So, I do still think and I'm more optimistic based on yesterday because we had to react and we did. And that's important. That shows that mentally we're there. I think we've gotten over the fact that we weren't going to be in the top 2. We've gotten over the fact that we got battered by Coventry. I think the narrative has been, let's reset, let's go for it. And I mean, obviously, time will tell. We might go on a crap run from this point, and I might be feeling very different about it. But I just think that was the right way to react. And against a decent team, Millwall, I think if they'd won, would they have only been 3 points off 6th place?
Yeah,
might be wrong in that.
Yes,
a little bit more, but they could have certainly been in the mix for, and they still could. I think they're only a couple of wins off the playoff place now. So they would have been
not a million. Wouldn't have been far off. Yeah, playing
that's good. That's good though, Gav. I'm glad that you're confident. From your lips to God's ears and all that. I think I'm just naturally cautious. You're half full, Henderson. I'm more, I'm expect the worst but hope for the best. I take that approach. But yeah, let's hope that we're all celebrating promotion at the end of the season. That's the key thing. It doesn't matter what what your expectation is 7 games out from the end of the season. If Sunderland make it back to the Premier League, that would be just absolutely perfect, wouldn't it?
It would indeed. Well, we'll hopefully, next time we chat to you, James, we'll be talking about a promoted Sunderland team. Maybe after the playoffs, we'll be sitting here going, see, we were right all along, we were going to do it.
And I'll be saying, doubts? What doubts? I don't know what you're talking about. It didn't happen.
Thanks for joining us, mate. It's been great.
Thank you. Yeah,
really good.
Thank you, James.
Cheers again, Martin. Thanks for joining us, mate.
No problem.
It's wee hour for me, for once. It's not you getting up at the crack of dawn and talking to me. It's the other way around.
Very pleasant for me.
Yeah. Thanks to the listeners. Thanks for joining us. As I said at the top of the show, there's a bunch of really, really great interviews already on our podcast feed that if you've missed, you need to catch up on. Really insightful chats with a bunch of really great guests. So make sure you catch up on everything you've missed. If you are new to us, get subscribed. We've got plenty to come. We've got some great interviews coming up this week, in particular, some insightful stuff. Martin's working on something in particular, which I hope we might be able to get out this week, which might be great.
Sometime this week, hopefully.
Yeah, well, we'll just leave it at that. But thank you very much for joining us. We will be back with another podcast probably tomorrow. We're just every day at this point. We can't get rid of us. So thank you very much, everyone. Catch you on the next one.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.